this process, we could take a table, take everything from the case that was hand washed, that wasn't going in the washer disinfector. We could lay that all out on a table, dry it off, and put it all through the window at once. We weren't reusing gloves. We weren't reusing any product to get that instrumentation passed over to the other side. Very cost-effective, environmentally friendly. I mean, it hits all the marks on that.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this vendor spotlight, we're speaking with Jim Schlosser, Ransom Willard. They're the sales manager and the director and site coordinator for Hospital Safety Solutions. We're going to be learning about their UVC pass-thru disinfection chamber and really how this technology came about. And we're also going to hear from somebody who is using it today in their facility. That's Debbie Timothy, a lead technician at St. James Hospital, which is part of the University of Rochester Medical Center in upstate New York. That is all coming up next. And this is definitely a story about sustainability, green initiatives, and faster processing times. So stay with us. We're going to be right back.
From 17 studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
I have the pleasure of speaking with Jim Schlosser, sales manager, and Ransom Willard, director and site coordinator at Hospital Safety Solutions, along with Debbie Timothy, a lead technician at St. James Hospital, part of the University of Rochester Medical Center in upstate New York. And we're going to be talking about the UVC pass-through chamber, which is a very unique technology that I think has an important place in sterile processing departments all across the country here. And we're going to be hearing a story today, not just a story about Debbie's experience, but also a story about how this technology was developed. So I'm excited to have all of you on the show. I'm going to introduce you kind of individually as I bring you into the conversation. We're going to start with you, Debbie, and I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about your experience. What's your background and what prepared you for becoming the acting director of SPS at your institution?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I started in the hospital setting. I started answering the phones down at the switchboard back in 2007. By 2009, I was full-time in sterile processing and had no experience other than answering the phones at the hospital. So it was all hands-on learning, and it was a lot different than it is today. And I got my certification in 2011. I've always been in a smaller hospital setting for the most part, but a portion of my career was in larger hospitals and with busier ORs, bigger hospitals and more patients. So the rural hospital setting is such a slower pace, but also has some disadvantages as far as instrumentation and getting things sterile and ready quicker almost because we're limited for storage and the amount of trays and instrumentation we have. So we need a process to be very efficient in getting those trays clean and disinfected and onto the clean side to be sterilized.
You know, in those smaller settings, Debbie, I mean, just even a call out can really put a lot of strain on the department, can it?
And add-on cases. We have 4 ORs right now and about 6 different surgeons that are doing the same procedures throughout. Every week, it's the same procedures, same instrumentation. So it's good to have the UV chambered pass through to speed things up for sure.
Well, we're going to be talking about the UVC pass-through chamber as we get along in this conversation, and it's specifically what it's done for you. And I think it's a really good story to be talking about that situation, especially in smaller rural hospitals, because when you talk about the staffing issues that are in the industry today, the stress that gets placed, as I was mentioning, when there is a call off, and the fact that you don't have multiples necessarily of instrumentation, you have a much smaller inventory to pull from. I feel like that definitely highlights that need for efficiency that hospitals across the country, not just in sterile processing, but in all kinds of services are looking for right now. I mean, the squeeze is pretty big, and I think making advancements in terms of technology and operational improvements is going to be so critical. I think that's the story we're going to hear from the HSS team. I'm going to start with Ransom because I'd like to hear a little bit about how HSS came to be. Obviously, it's in your name, Safety Solutions, so I'm sure that's part of the story. But can you talk about the company when it was founded and really how you've gone to support sterile processing departments?
Yes, thank you, Justin, and greetings, everyone. Truth be told, Jim and I started back in our childhood and then regrouped at the beginning of 2000 after being away from each other with our families and whatnot, but growing up. And, well, together, we probably have about 45 years of medical device sales experience. Jim's been in it a little bit longer than I have, but in about 2013, Jim approached me and wanted to get into UV disinfection. It was kind of a new thing at the time. We traveled around and looked at various UV devices, UV equipment, from wheelchairs to robots to this, that, and the other. And we finally found a chamber that would disinfect items, devices, articles for the grocery industry. We thought this would fit perfect into a hospital setting or a medical setting, any kind of a clean room, actually. And we started working with a company called HealthGuard UVC in North Carolina. And to make a long story short, we decided to buy the company and move it forward and create a pass-through chamber specifically designed to replace the pass-through window in the sterile processing.
You know, Ransom, that's something I always wondered about. I have a clinical background as a nurse, and then I made a move into medical device sales around 2010. And I remember learning about sterile processing, and you hear about the sterilizer disinfector, and you're putting instruments through there, and they're not only getting cleaned, but they're getting disinfected. And then you have this pass-through window, and they may be cleaned, but they're not getting disinfected. I mean, for me, I always thought that was a huge area of opportunity for improvement. So, Jim, I'm assuming you were seeing the same thing as the two of you identified this HealthGuard UVC chamber that's now the UVC pass-through chamber that you guys offer. What else were you seeing in the industry? What got you excited about potentially bringing this to market?
Well, we thought that would be an awesome product for hospitals, just for countertop units, could be in the OR, NICU, people with dirty phones and things come in. But it was interesting. A curious scientist from HealthMark actually was trying to determine if hand-washed items were safe to handle and compared to machine-washed items. So she was aware of our equipment, and what she did is went to 3 different hospitals and hand-washed the items like the way they normally do, but they swabbed them. Then they put them through our device for 1 minute in the UV chamber, and UV light kills most bacteria and virus. And what the results were, she swabbed them again afterwards, and the results showed that there was an average of 36.6 colony-forming units of bacteria on hand-washed items. And in just 1 minute, we dropped it to 0.3. And for the heck of it, she even did the machine washed items, and they still had 9.2 colony forming units, and we dropped that to 0.1. So it's remarkable technology. And instead of just a pass-through window, which sometimes they leak, we put in a big cube, big box with the UV bulbs in it, and it's got a door on the dirty side and a door on the clean side. So the dirty side people, after washing the instruments, set it in the chamber, close their door, start the button. A minute later, the clean side can take them out, and it's a much safer environment. A lot of people in the clean side don't wear gloves anyway because you think it's clean. And remember, if it's not clean, it can't get sterile. So this is going to keep the clean side workers safer and obviously help with the patients. So that's we got excited about that. And it was not our intent at first, but this scientist suggested what we really need is a chamber exactly like that.
Well, it's funny that you say that about the gloves on the clean side, because I remember when I started educating, it's like one of the hottest topics in the industry is like, should we be wearing gloves on the clean side? And Debbie, I see you. I know nobody else can see you because it's a podcast, but you're nodding your head.
That's a big deal. And, on the clean side, it's hard to put your instrument trays together. The gloves it's not the same as being barehanded. You want to know when you are touching that with your bare hands, because it's just easier to do your work without the gloves on. And you want to know when you go to grab that instrumentation that it's been disinfected. That's the most reassuring thing for the clean side, I think. You don't want to have to wear the gloves, but you don't want to touch anything that's not been disinfected.
So, it was also interesting. You were talking about how the doors work, and you alluded to the operational benefits, Jim. And Ransom, I'm going to actually have this go back over to you, because the safety is very much, I'm hearing loud and clear about employee safety as much as it is about patient safety and making sure that the instruments are not only, cleaned, but disinfected when they come over. And I'd love to hear about some of the safety features that are patented with this technology, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, one of the things that we were concerned about, and that any company that makes these chambers is concerned about, is can you get uniform coverage of the light? So one of the experiment that we did with pathogens was to put Petri dishes in every corner on every level of the two shelves and go ahead and run the cycle. And what we came out with was 100% disinfected on every level, in every corner, on every space in that unit. So we are confident that we are getting a uniform coverage of the UV light within our chamber. And the way we have done that is with reflector bars on the floor and on the sides, on the doors, that will bounce that light around and get to every little nook and cranny of that chamber.
I've had numerous UVC conversations, other spotlights like this one. And, one was really focused on terminal disinfection in the operating room. Another one was more disinfection of instruments in the GI space, like intubation. And this is the first one I've really had utilizing the technology, but something that's central to the theme that talks about your reflectors is that shadow effect, especially when you talk about room disinfection. That shadow effect seems to be one of the challenges, especially for larger spaces. So it's great to hear that you've addressed that with the pass-through. And I just kind of wondered, do you have any competition in this space? Are there other companies doing pass-through, windows and chambers like this?
If I could speak to that briefly, we really aren't aware of any competitors that are doing what we're doing. But to be clear, I'm aware of the shadowed spaces in whole room cleaning. But if you put in a cannulated scope and the light doesn't touch inside that cannula, it will not get in cannulated or lumen devices. But it does on the outside. So, it doesn't do everything, but just to be clear there. Another safety feature we put in was the automatic door shut off. When the door's open, if somebody opened it up in the middle of a cycle, it automatically shuts off. And we have a polycarbonate view-safe window that people can actually see the blue light emanating when the machine's on. So it's kind of doubtful anybody's going to do that anyway.
That is an excellent feature.
So, Debbie, you just said that is a great feature, but why do you feel like that's a great feature?
Well, having the window on both sides. You can see through and know that the door is shut. I mean, there's no doubt that the process has ran correctly because of the window. You can see the door is closed. This eliminates the need for using that vanometer that probably most people in sterile processing these days don't even know what that is. I don't know. Maybe they do. We used to have to check with a tissue around the pass-through window to make sure that our air exchanges were, everything was correct with the air exchanges. That's not necessary now because of both doors being closed and the fact that you can look through the window and see, oh, they have that door open on the other side. You're not going to open it. The air exchanges are staying within the parameters that they need to be.
Yeah, we can't have the air flowing in the wrong direction. There's a reason that they're positive and negative is to make sure that it's only flowing from the clean side to the dirty side and never in the other direction.
Right. So it's just an excellent way to get your equipment from the dirty side to the clean side with no doubt that the air exchanges aren't being affected because the doors are never kept open long enough for that to happen or for the temperature or humidity to change. It's an excellent feature.
Yeah, quality control is a big part of what you're saying right there, and quality assurance, there's no doubt. So the current process that I've typically seen has been like cables and scopes, and then they get sprayed down with a chemical that's supposed to disinfect them. And that's really what I see as the current process. We just talked about there really not being another competitor with this technology leveraging UVC. But Jim, maybe you want to talk a little bit further about chemicals and the advantages of using UVC instead of like a foam or a spray.
Yeah, sure. A lot of customers brought that up to me. They really like that this is green technology. It doesn't leave a residue. And the people have complained about some of the foams or sprays, the chemicals, the potential carcinogens, but they just didn't like how they smelled. And it took about 6, 8, 10 minutes that it had to be on there. Our cycle time is 1 minute. So you try to blot things dry. You stick it on the trays, turn it on, minute later. and you're done, and with no residue. Even alcohol leaves a residue. There's studies on that. So that's a good thing. It's a good point.
Yeah. And that disinfection, to speak to that length of time has everything to do with dwell time. So as you look at those chemicals, it's really, especially with alcohol, it's about dwell time. And so you're going to see those times in the IFU, not to mention the residue. Like you said, Jim, that's a pretty big improvement in turnaround time, cutting it down from 6 or 7 minutes, depending on the IFU, down to a minute. 5 minutes matters.
And also the cost. I've actually had an SPD manager who justified the cost of our unit by saying, look at all my employees' time that this has taken and look at the cost of this foam I'm putting on. And over X number of years, this is going to pay for itself. So this is good thing.
Yeah. And it's also green. Like when you talk about the focus on sustainability in hospitals and green initiatives, I just think going to a process that eliminates the use of chemicals is very much a green initiative. Debbie, it sounds like you want to add to that as well.
Well, yeah. Well, I was just going to mention on the topic of being environmentally friendly, there's no chemicals, there's no water. It's very efficient, and the disinfection cycle is so fast. That is what makes it more efficient as well. It does all the things. I mean, it lowers daily cost. Back during the pandemic when our PPE was
skyrocketing in price.
Yeah, we just didn't have it. We didn't have extra gloves to spare. We were very conscious of what we were using throughout the day. And this process, we could take everything from the case that was hand washed, that wasn't going in the washer disinfector. We could lay that all out on a table, dry it off, and put it all through the window at once. We weren't reusing gloves. We weren't reusing any product to get that instrumentation passed over to the other side. Very cost effective, environmentally friendly. I mean, it hits all the marks on that.
Is that when you heard about the UVC pass-through disinfection chamber? Was like during the pandemic or the early days, or did you hear about it before then?
No, we were fortunate enough to have it already in place and set up prior to the pandemic. I had never seen it or heard of it. We are in a new facility that was opened in 2020.
Oh, okay.
St. James has been around for, I don't know, years, 60 years or more. I shouldn't say the number because it's been around as long as I can remember. But this new facility, we came from the old hospital to see it several times during the build. And there was this hole in the wall between, the place was empty, just the structure was up, and we're walking around and trying to visualize what our department would be like. And here's the decontam area, and here's the clean side. And I believe that the washers were installed and the cart washer was installed, but then here's this big hole in the wall. And they kept saying the UV window is going to go there, the UV light, the UV pass-through window. And we just couldn't envision it. It got installed before we opened, of course. So it got installed and we learned about it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of such a thing. And then thankfully, so thankful that it was already in place, installed during the pandemic, because the list of things we put through there, just incredible. And everybody that would come in with dirty eyeglasses or their name badge, we could say, oh, throw it in our UV pass-through chamber to disinfect it. They were in awe. They had never heard of such a thing. So
what does it look like? I mean, we haven't really talked about what it looks like and how do you load it? You're talking about the doors opening. Can you walk me through the process and how you just build this into your day-to-day operations and what it looks like?
I can try to describe it. It's probably there's a door that's probably 3 or 4 foot tall, and it's right inside. You walk inside the decontam area, and right to the right, very conveniently, it's right there. So you can just step into decontam, place whatever you want inside it. So it's just a 3 or 4 foot tall door that you open up, and it's got the shelves and the lights in there. The shelves pull in and out.
All right. That's really interesting just about how you learned about it, because it was just in a whole new redesign. There's this process improvement. But Ransom, I realize we're gotten this far into the conversation and we haven't really talked about what it looks like. Like, what are the specs? And then maybe Debbie, we'll have you talk about loading it and unloading it and how you operationalize it. But Ransom, can you describe the pass-through chamber?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it is our initial chamber that we had was just a countertop chamber. So if you can envision a dorm refrigerator with one door, and you open it up, you put things in, hit the button, you take them out, they're disinfected. What we did was we added a door to the backside. And then we come out and we measure the area where that chamber is going to go in, and we'll custom fit it to fit the hole in the wall now once we remove the window. So that's what it looks like if you can envision that.
I really like the custom part of that, because the last thing somebody wants to do when they want to adopt a technology like this is find out that they can't work with their existing structures to get it in place, and then they're not able to adopt it. So I think that flexibility is really huge for departments that are listening to this and may want to install your pass-through disinfection chambers. Debbie, how does this operationalize? I kind of teed this up, said I was going to come back to it. What is it like for loading and unloading as an end user on the front lines, cleaning and disinfecting and sterilizing these instruments every day?
It's simple to load. It's easy to use. We have 2 shelves in ours, so we can fit quite a bit of instrumentation in there if by chance we have it. Typically, we have more than enough room for what we're doing. Because we're so small, we have 1 case cart at a time usually, and we have no trouble fitting everything in there that we need to in one cycle.
What kind of items are you putting through there, Deb?
Well, I mentioned name badges and eyeglasses and personal things like that. But as far as instrumentation goes, everything that can't be put in the washer disinfector. So we have our cameras and light cords from Olympus. We have some Zimmer products, the Dermatome, cameras, light cords, scopes. I know we spoke about how it's just the outside exposure to the scope, but so we're going through the full process of cleaning and disinfecting the inside. We're not skipping any steps, but this extra step of disinfecting the outside again is just so amazing to me. We're putting cords, bipolar cautery cord that used to have to be wiped down with peroxide wipe. The contact time on that wipe was 10 minutes. So now we wash it, dry it off, put it through the window for 1 minute. It's ready to go. We're not waiting 10 minutes for that contact time on the wipe. And the instructions for use, it's validated for this process, for this step. We put our batteries, our striker power, the batteries to the striker power in there, rigid scopes as well. And one thing that's come in real handy is the instruments that get left in the baskets in the instrument washer disinfectors. They'll be random little objects. Our baskets are stainless steel, so they look like the same color as the instruments, and we'll have occasionally things get left in the baskets. And so typically what we would do is have to wait until another load was ran in the washer disinfector. Now we just take it with our clean hands, clean gloves, put it out of the washer into the UV chamber, and they've got it on the clean side in no time.
Yeah, it's certainly not slowing you down.
Not at all.
And Justin, could I just interject something here? She got it as they were going into a new facility, and they don't do a lot of high volume, but one of her sister hospitals in the Rochester system had one for 3 or 4 years prior to them. And I guarantee you they're using it over 100 times a day. So it's
wow.
It works well in a small or a high flow situations. Cause again, it's only a minute cycle.
All right, Debbie, we're pretty much coming to the end, but if there was one message that you wanted to communicate to the SPD community out there, what would it be?
Besides the fact that it's so environmentally friendly, I would say the reassurance of the instruments being disinfected by the validation options also that are out there. We didn't speak on that, but in sterile processing, everything has to be tested and documented. And we are able, with an indicator strip, we're able to verify that these lamps that we use every day are in the range for disinfection by the indicator strips that we use for testing at the beginning of each day before we start to use the UV chamber.
Excellent. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate your candidness, Debbie, as we've had the discussion about just how it's improved sort of the operations at your facility. And Jim and Ransom, I think this is really addressing one of those major gaps or questions in the industry, but also I think the efficiency in terms of turnaround time. And even, Debbie, honestly, the thing that stood out to me the most was those items that get left in the basket incidentally, that the basket then comes back over and you realize like that whole tray might have to wait until the next load goes through. And now you're able to just keep things going. Cause we talk about pulling through in sterile processing all the time. Like you should be pulling those instruments through. That's what prevents those bottlenecks and the slowdowns that really impact and can cause case delays in the operating room. And this allows you to keep that momentum of pulling from the dirty decontam area into the clean area and ultimately through sterilization and up to the procedure.
Exactly. It's hard not to be excited about this. Coming from an old hospital, we were very old. I think I mentioned that. And getting all of this new stuff. And this is one of the most exciting pieces of new equipment that we received in our new remodel. Not a remodel, a rebuild.
Yeah, some best practices that you're establishing for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on, Debbie.
Thank you.
I do want everybody to know that you can visit Hospital Safety Solutions by visiting their website, www.hospitalsafetysolutions.com. You really couldn't have made it any easier. You can call them at 844-889-6757. And Jim and Ransom, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this technology. And hopefully we can raise, awareness for some time savings opportunities and some best practices related to disinfection of those hand wash items. What plans do you have for the coming year? Let's go to Jim. Where can people find you maybe in person at events?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you at Beyond Clean for just having such awesome podcasts and helping educate everybody in the whole field. It's like you guys do a great job. So thank you for this opportunity to share this. We'll be at the upcoming HSPA as well as many other local HSPA meetings around the country. We often do OR manager, a couple big major meetings. We did APIC last year. I'm not sure that we're going to do that this year, but that's where you can find us. It's easiest to call that 1-844-UV-WORKS or 889-6757 or contact us. We're upgrading our website. Should be finished in a couple weeks. We'll be glad to come in and take some measurements and see what we can do or talk about it more.
And you also provide speakers for events. Like I know a lot of the regional chapters are getting back to in person after quite a lull there and doing a lot of virtual work. Do you have speakers that are available for these local and regional chapters?
We've got some excited customers like Debbie. We haven't gone full blown, but we've had a few people that have offered that would love to tell their story. So sure, if they need that, they could call us. That would be a good idea.
And Ransom, I want to thank you for coming on as well. One of the things that I want to make sure I mention before we wrap up, and I want to give you a chance for a couple of final words here, but also you have some video testimonials. So if people are looking for, other stories like Debbie's in other settings, you have video testimonials that you can share as well?
Yeah, we do. We just completed and actually it aired a Viewpoint with Dennis Quaid, where we told the story like this about a year ago. And this taping will be on our website. I'm usually the one that does the measurements, the technical part of it. And so at some time I can address how that's done.
Excellent. Ransom, Jim, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Justin. It's awesome.
All right, that was Jim Schlosser, Sales Manager, Ransom Willard, Director and Site Coordinator with Hospital Safety Solutions. And we were talking about the UVC pass-through chamber. And we got to hear from Debbie Timothy, lead technician at St. James Hospital, which is part of the University of Rochester Medical Center in upstate New York. And I love the conversations where we hear about the impact on these vendor spotlights around a new technology or a new process that can really help decrease the amount of time it takes to reprocess instruments and save time, because I know we're all looking for ways to operate more efficiently these days. The utilization of UVC technology really taking off right now. I've had so many conversations around various applications of this technology, but I feel like in this case with the UVC pass-through disinfection chamber, we're talking about a process that has kind of had a gap there, is how do we disinfect those hand wash items? And so some really interesting data shared with us too in regards to the study around colony forming units, with a significant reduction from an average of 33.6 lowered down to an average of 0.3. So I'd say that's a pretty substantial improvement in the colony forming units and potential disinfection of those hand wash items. So you can definitely learn more by calling them at 844-UV-WORKS. That's 844-889-6757. You can visit their website, which by the time this airs will be updated and have lots more video testimonials from their current customers. That website is www.hospitalsafetysolutions.com, and you'll also be able to find them at HSPA in early May. That's going to do it for this vendor spotlight. I do want to remind everybody that the best way to listen to the Beyond Clean podcast is to download the smartphone app for iPhone and Android. We've got bonus content, and honestly, you can search for different topics and categories of the different episodes and podcasts that we put out. We are available on all the main podcast applications. We'd love it if you followed us on LinkedIn and Facebook, right there on social media, where we really come to you and live on the internet. And we also want your feedback. If you've heard a certain episode that's really made a difference in your day-to-day practice, or you have some ideas about some stories that could be told or topics that we could discuss with a subject matter expert in the industry, or maybe you want to be a guest on the Beyond Clean podcast, simply send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. All right, that's going to do it for this vendor spotlight on Beyond Clean.